We spend a huge part of our lives doing things like working at a desk, sitting in chairs for hours, staring at screens, or standing in one spot performing the same task over and over again. We travel everywhere by car or motorbike, even for short distances. We consume large amounts of sugary foods and drinks that are readily available at stores. We stay up late under artificial lights and spend most of our time indoors. All of this seems perfectly normal to modern humans. After all, people around the world live in much the same way. But if we take a step back and look at the broader arc of human history, this lifestyle is actually quite strange. The modern way of living only started to take shape with the Industrial Revolution. A lifestyle even remotely resembling this one may have first emerged around the Agricultural Revolution, which happened less than 10,000 years ago. Before that, for hundreds of thousands of years, humans lived in completely different ways. Take a look around you. Books, chairs, shoes. All the everyday items we take for granted are actually very new in the timeline of human existence. In truth, they're not things the human body was ever designed for. The human body wasn't built for sitting on sofas, staring at screens, or wearing shoes all day. Sitting too long often leads to back pain. Staring at books or screens for hours on end contributes to nearsightedness. And even the most comfortable shoes can cause a host of foot problems, from bunions and fungal infections between the toes to inflammation in the tissues under the soles. Many common health issues in today's world are the result of habits that stray far from what our bodies evolved to handle. Obesity, type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, heart disease, and even cancer are just a few examples. These conditions continue to haunt the modern world and share several defining traits. They're chronic, non-infectious, tend to worsen with age, and are heavily influenced by lifestyle choices. Modern medicine has made great strides in managing these diseases, but a true cure remains elusive. In fact, every year, more people are diagnosed with these conditions, and the death toll continues to rise. We tend to imagine the world we live in today as a more comfortable and prosperous one. Thanks to advances in science and technology, our basic needs, food, shelter, clothing, are easier to fulfill than ever. We've even started to expand our needs to include an endless variety of new items and experiences. But from an evolutionary perspective, this modern lifestyle is deeply out of sync with the way our bodies were meant to live. For millions of years, our species evolved from ape-like ancestors who lived in small groups, hunting and gathering food, moving constantly in response to their environment. The human body evolved under these conditions, adapting to a life of movement, variety, and physical engagement with the natural world. The physical features of our species weren't planned. They emerged through generations of survival and adaptation. Traits that helped us thrive were passed on, while less useful ones disappeared over time. And despite the massive changes in how we live today, our bodies haven't changed all that much. In many ways, we are still equipped with the same biology as our ancestors from tens of thousands of years ago. Then, around 10,000 years ago, the Agricultural Revolution triggered a dramatic shift in how humans lived. This transformation happened in a blink of an eye when viewed through the lens of biological evolution, which unfolds at a much slower pace. Settling down to farm the land and live alongside domesticated animals meant humans were suddenly exposed to very different activities, diets, and entirely new diseases. It was a massive disruption, one brought on by a swift departure from the lifestyle our ancestors had followed for millions of years. That disruption only accelerated with the rise of the industrial era some 250 years ago. Human life began to change at breakneck speed. People started living in unfamiliar environments, performing new types of work, and adopting habits and routines that strayed even further from the physical design of their bodies. Bodies that, in many ways, still resembled those of their ancestors from tens of thousands of years earlier. As a result, modern societies have witnessed a surge in health problems. Obesity, type 2 diabetes, coronary heart disease, osteoporosis, hypertension, asthma, allergies, chronic insomnia, cavities, anxiety disorders, depression, flat feet, nearsightedness, and chronic back pain are now alarmingly common. And that's not even counting the devastating infectious diseases like smallpox, plague, and malaria that used to erupt in deadly outbreaks. though, thanks to modern medicine, many of these have been brought under control. What happened was that the revolutions in agriculture and technology progressed so rapidly that natural selection had no time to adjust. The human body, shaped over millions of years for one kind of life, was suddenly thrust into another. Cultural evolution sped forward like a race car, while biological evolution continued at a snail's pace. Some experts refer to this growing gap as disevolution, a term used to describe how certain biological traits no longer align with the demands of modern life. This doesn't mean all human adaptations have been negative. In fact, some biological changes have been advantageous. Humans now possess larger brains, flexible feet, and skillful hands. But still, many mismatches remain between our biological design and the lives we lead today. For generation after generation, we've faced illnesses and health issues caused by these mismatches. And because we haven't addressed the root causes, these problems persist, and in some cases, grow worse with time. Among the many health issues that plague modern humans, one of the most significant is our love for sweet foods. But this isn't just a modern craving, it's the result of millions of years of evolution. What was once an adaptive advantage has now become a dangerous trap in today's world. Picture yourself as a hunter-gatherer thousands of years ago, roaming through forests and open plains in search of food. One of the most prized and rarest discoveries would be something sweet, like ripe fruit or wild honey. Sweetness was nature's way of signaling a high-energy food source that the body could use immediately. When you stumbled upon something sweet, your brain responded by releasing dopamine, a chemical that made you feel good and encouraged you to search for more. This reward system was essential to survival. In the wild, you wouldn't find chocolate cake, ice cream, or soda. Even the fruits you did come across were smaller and far less sugary than the cultivated varieties we have today. So our brains evolved in an environment where sugar was scarce. Under those conditions, the ability to detect and crave sweetness made perfect sense. Sweetness meant calories. Calories meant energy. Energy meant survival. The trouble began when humans transitioned into the agricultural age and later, through the Industrial Revolution, into the era of supermarkets and food delivery apps. Now, sweet foods are not only easy to find, they're mass-produced, and the sugar content far exceeds anything nature ever offered. We no longer just eat fruit. We consume sodas, candies, pastries, cakes, and a wide range of processed foods loaded with added sugar. The average modern person consumes more sugar in a single day than their ancestors did in an entire month, if not more. This is a textbook example of what scientists call an evolutionary mismatch. The drive that once protected us from starvation now leaves us vulnerable to obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and even mental health issues like food addiction and depression. The brain's reward system, which once helped us survive, now often tricks us into overindulging. What makes this problem even more severe is how the modern food industry takes advantage of our biological preference for sweetness. Food manufacturers design products to hit what's known as the bliss point, the precise combination of sugar, fat, and salt that maximizes dopamine release in the brain. This engineered pleasure keeps us coming back for more. We don't just enjoy sweet foods, we become hooked on them. And complicating matters further is the fact that our metabolism hasn't changed. The human body still reacts to excess sugar the way it did thousands of years ago, by storing it as fat in preparation for famine. But that famine never arrives. Instead, we live in a world of constant abundance. This mismatch has also driven up the rates of obesity, hypertension, and heart disease. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors lived as hunter-gatherers in an environment where food was scarce. They had to travel long distances to find it, and their diet consisted mostly of lean meat, fish, roots, wild fruits, nuts, and leafy greens. Simple carbohydrates were extremely rare, as were large amounts of saturated fats or salt. They were physically active for most of the day, not because they were exercising, but because that level of movement was simply part of surviving. Hunting, digging, carrying loads, building shelters, and looking after children. Now, compare that to our modern world. We live in an era of caloric abundance, but with minimal physical effort. We no longer walk kilometers to get food. It's in the fridge, or even easier, delivered to our door with a few taps on a smartphone. Most of the food we consume today is calorie dense, especially from processed sugars and fats, yet low in fiber and essential nutrients. This lifestyle is a stark contrast to what human bodies were designed for by evolution. The first major mismatch lies in our metabolic system. Because our bodies evolved in a world of frequent food shortages, they became incredibly efficient at storing energy in the form of fat. This was a powerful advantage when food was unpredictable. But in the modern age, when food is constantly available and overabundant, that same efficiency backfires. Our bodies keep storing energy as fat, still operating under the illusion that famine is just around the corner, a famine that never comes. The result is a global obesity epidemic. The second mismatch shows up in how our bodies regulate blood pressure. In the wild, salt was scarce, so human kidneys evolved to conserve it with great efficiency. Today, we consume far too much salt, mainly from processed and fast food. That ancient salt-conserving system now leads to fluid retention, increased blood volume, and high blood pressure, hypertension. Fat intake is another area where things have gone awry. The kinds of fats we eat today, mostly saturated fats from processed meats, high-fat dairy, fast foods, and fried items, are very different from the unsaturated fats consumed by our ancestors, which came from wild animals and fish. This imbalance contributes to higher levels of LDL, or bad cholesterol, the buildup of plaque in arteries, and eventually coronary heart disease. A sedentary lifestyle adds to the damage. Our ancestors moved throughout the day, not with structured exercise routines, but as a natural consequence of survival. In the human body, active muscles are essential metabolic regulators. They help control blood sugar, burn fat, and keep the cardiovascular system in check. Without enough movement, those muscles become underutilized, worsening insulin resistance, raising blood sugar levels, and accelerating the buildup of visceral fat around internal organs. This dramatic shift in diet and caloric intake compared to our hunter-gatherer forebears is one of the main drivers behind modern metabolic disorders. Our ancestors ate to survive. We eat for comfort, habit, and temptation. They didn't eat 3 square meals a day with snacks in between. They ate when food was available, sometimes once or twice a day, and sometimes not at all. Their eating pattern was naturally intermittent, shaped by nature's unpredictability. Their bodies became efficient at using energy sparingly and storing only small amounts of fat because there was never a guarantee of a meal tomorrow. Their diet, too, was profoundly different. Hunter-gatherer food was fresh, whole, and unprocessed. Hunted meat, fish, wild fruits, root vegetables, nuts, and leafy greens. It was low in sugar, low in salt, and rich in fiber and micronutrients. Carbohydrates existed, but in complex forms, not white sugar or refined flour. There were no refined oils, artificial sweeteners, or drive-through meals. Modern humans, by contrast, live in a world of caloric excess. We consume energy-dense foods that are nutritionally poor, so-called empty calories. Our diets are dominated by sugar, white flour, cooking oils, processed snacks, and sweetened drinks. Our bodies weren't built to handle this constant influx of energy, especially in such concentrated doses. Where the average ancestral daily intake hovered around 2,000 to 2,500 calories, many people today consume well over 3,000 calories, often without even realizing it. But the problem isn't just about how many calories we consume, it's how those calories are structured. Foods high in sugar and processed fats are absorbed quickly, causing sharp spikes in blood sugar and insulin. The body reacts by storing the excess energy as fat, especially in the belly. Meanwhile, the body doesn't get enough fiber, vitamins, and antioxidants from whole foods to keep the metabolic system in balance. Eating too often, especially late-night snacking, keeps the digestive system running constantly, with no downtime to recover or reset. It's worth noting that even hunter-gatherers spent plenty of time resting, but they didn't have the luxury of excess food. Resting was an adaptive behavior in their world. In our world, where food is abundant and activity optional, that same behavior turns into a risk. Back pain is another vivid example of evolutionary mismatch. Our ancestors lived in bodies that were constantly in motion. They walked long distances, squatted to rest, bent frequently to gather food, climbed over uneven terrain, carried loads across great stretches, and sat in a variety of natural, flexible positions throughout the day, not in stiff office chairs for 8 hours straight. The human spine evolved not to remain still, but to support a dynamic lifestyle filled with varied movement. It was this balance between activity and natural rest that kept the spine healthy and resilient. But then came the Industrial Revolution, followed by the digital age, and everything changed. Suddenly, human bodies were expected to adapt to a life of prolonged stillness, sitting at desks, hunching over phones, driving for hours, and often lying down for long stretches with minimal movement. Modern sitting posture, especially the forward-leaning kind common when staring at screens, places uneven pressure on the lower back, particularly on the lumbar region. The intervertebral discs, which act like shock absorbers between each vertebra, end up compressed on one side for hours at a time. Over time, these discs can bulge and, in more serious cases, rupture and press against spinal nerves, causing pain, tingling, or numbness. On top of that, the muscles we rely on to support our spine, our core, are no longer regularly engaged. These muscles, which include the abdominals, hip stabilizers, and lower back muscles, were once active from dawn until dusk. Every step, lift, and twist involved them. But now, with most people sitting for the majority of their day, these muscles grow weak from underuse. And when the core isn't doing its job, the spine has to compensate. It takes on extra strain just to keep us upright. That constant burden leads to fatigue, stiffness, and eventually chronic discomfort or pain. Modern footwear also plays a surprising role in this equation. Human feet were made to walk on natural, uneven ground, on soil, sand, or grass, with flexible arches that absorb impact and adjust to every step. But today, most of us wear stiff-soled shoes while walking on flat, unyielding surfaces like concrete and tile. These artificial conditions alter our natural gait, which then affects our posture. Small misalignments in the way we walk can ripple upward, creating imbalances in the hips, pelvis, and spine. Over time, this adds even more pressure to the lower back and even the neck. All of this is made worse by modern work culture and leisure habits. Sitting for hours is considered normal, expected even. Our downtime often revolves around screens instead of physical activity. Whether we're scrolling through a phone, binge watching a series, or gaming for hours, our bodies remain in the same position for too long. This is not how the human body was meant to function. Our ancestors didn't suffer from the same kinds of back issues we do, not because they were stronger or more evolved, but because they used their bodies in the way evolution intended. Their daily movements included walking, lifting, squatting, stretching, and resting in natural ways. Their bodies were challenged and supported by their environment. Ours, in contrast, are cushioned, stiffened, and confined by desks, screens, car seats, and sofas. Depression and chronic stress in modern humans are among the clearest examples of evolutionary mismatch, where the ancient wiring of our brains clashes with the demands of the contemporary world. Our minds were not built for the long, lingering anxieties that define modern life. They were forged in a world where stress was immediate, physical, and short-lived. Being chased by a predator, getting into a sudden skirmish with another group, or dealing with a burst of conflict within the tribe. These were the kinds of threats our ancestors faced. And in response, their bodies flooded with stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, sharpening their senses, increasing heart rate, and directing energy to muscles. Once the danger passed, the system relaxed. The threat was gone. The body and mind could return to baseline. But in the world we live in today, the threats are no longer lions or sudden ambushes in the forest. They come in the form of an unpaid bill, a passive-aggressive email from a colleague, a deadline looming on the calendar, or the slow drip of loneliness. And unlike those ancestral dangers, modern stressors don't go away after a sprint or a scuffle. They persist. They hover in the background. They haunt us at night. This means that the stress response, which was once a life-saving short burst, now runs almost constantly for many people. The hormonal system designed for momentary emergency is overstretched. Cortisol levels remain elevated. Sleep becomes fragmented. The immune system weakens. The brain, under siege from within, begins to falter. Our ancestors also lived in intimate, interconnected groups. Small bands of people, maybe a few dozen, who knew each other's names, stories, and histories. They hunted together, gathered together, raised children together, mourned losses together. This closeness wasn't just convenient, it was crucial. It gave people a sense of belonging, emotional safety, and collective meaning. Their brains were constantly nourished by eye contact, physical touch, shared rituals, and daily cooperation. It was a social nutrient that our minds still crave today. But modern life, especially in cities, has fractured that human closeness. Many people now live alone or among thousands of strangers with whom they share no real connection. Workplaces are often impersonal. Neighborhoods can be silent and cold, and much of what we call socializing now happens through screens, likes, messages, and filtered photos that give the illusion of connection, but rarely deliver the depth we're wired to need. This social undernourishment leaves many people emotionally starved. Without real community, our brains struggle to regulate mood, and we become more vulnerable to anxiety and depression. There's also the matter of purpose. For most of human history, purpose was immediate and embodied. You woke up hungry, so you went looking for food. You heard danger, so you protected your kin. You saw someone in pain, so you comforted them. Life had a clear arc of effort and reward, of survival and meaning. But now, many people wake up not with the instinct to survive, but with the weight of obligations they didn't choose. Going to a job they don't love, to pay for things they may not need, so they can maintain a lifestyle they didn't design. This disconnect between what our brains expect life to feel like and what modern life actually is creates a kind of existential friction. We weren't designed for long commutes, fluorescent lights, performance reviews, or scrolling through carefully curated images of other people's lives. And when the tasks of daily life feel removed from survival, removed from tribe, and removed from meaning, the brain interprets that as something being deeply wrong. Depression, then, is not simply a disorder. It may be a kind of message, a flare sent up from the deepest parts of ourselves saying, "This isn't the life we were meant to live."